Good afternoon or morning, whatever it is, and I hope you all are doing okay today. It is day 4. Yeah, hopefully this will be over soon, but hey, we're going to make it through it. Today, I'm going to want you to read pages 316 through 321. 316 to 321. Real quickly, just going to go through a couple of things. You're familiar with a lot of these dictators. You know what a dictator is. You learned a lot of this earlier in years. But this section talks about different dictators for different parts of the world. One was the Bolshevik Revolution, and they were the violent supporters of change in Russia. The Mensheviks were the peaceful protesters, so to speak, and the Bolsheviks won out. Now, their leader was Lenin. Lenin was a Marxist, except in the fact that he didn't think you could have peaceful change without violent revolution. He also thought that you had to have a strong dictator or strong leader in order to pull off Karl Marx's communist ideas. And the third way he disagreed, he thought that if you limited power to a small elite group who would exercise great authority, Marx had this idea that everybody would create a great dictatorship by the masses, and he said, no, you've got to have a small group. So those were some of the differences. But Lenin opposed religion. He made atheism a vital. It was a vital part of Marxist teaching. That's what he said. He said that religion was the opium of the people, and he actually had the military put down resistance of pastors and priests that dared to oppose his views. Lenin died in 1924, and you would think, well, that's good. But a guy comes along by the name of Joseph Stalin. Now, he is brutal. Stalin makes Lenin look light, so to speak. Stalin is estimated he destroyed over half the homes in Russia, trying to get people in line with his agenda. He destroyed agriculture, trying to build it up. He tried to increase industrial production. He ended up killing millions of folks by his policies and by direct, hey, you don't agree with me, you're dead. So I want you to read about Stalin and Lenin, and also about Germany and Adolf Hitler. And you'll see a little bit of how Hitler came to rise. And your book doesn't go into a lot of details. It leaves out the fact that, Hitler had been in prison and he wrote a book, Mein Kampf. But anyway, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party, Hitler came to lead that. And everything that Hitler did, because I mentioned this before, that Hitler fought in World War I, and he didn't think Germany should quit. He thought they should fight on. And everything that Hitler did, once he came to power and declared it a dictatorship, and he was in control, everything was geared toward war. He wanted the roads where we could move, much like our interstate system is. He wanted everything where you could move army equipment through Germany quickly. He wanted them self-sustaining, where no one could cut off their food supply or their steel supply or anything like that. Everything that he did was geared toward war. And I think when you analyze Hitler, I think that that was his game plan from the start. I'm going to take power. I'm going to make Germany great again. Instead of MAGA, it's yeah, make Germany great again. He wanted them to be a world power to the point that they took over other countries. And so once he takes over, everything is geared toward that. We also see Benito Mussolini. And he was part of the fascist party. And you see the basic rules of fascism. Businesses privately owned but tightly controlled by the government. Extreme emphasis on nationalism and glorifying the state. And dictators supported by the military often govern in a fascist state. So those are the basic principles. In other words, you could own your house, you could own your business, but you had no rights and you had no freedom in that. The government controlled it. And, a lot of people will throw that term around, fascist, today. They don't understand it. When you hear some news reporter, well, Donald Trump or so-and-so is a fascist, no, y'all don't understand the word. And so I want you to read a little bit about that. But Benito Mussolini, the one thing that he did, he ended the long-standing dispute with the Roman Catholic Church. He gives the Catholics Vatican City. So if you're familiar with Vatican City, this is where that comes out of. But he, much like Hitler, wanted everything to be economically self-sufficient. He geared up toward war. And it all stems from the fact that Italy was one of the allies during World War I. They lost about 500,000 men, but they didn't get anything out of it. And their economy was a wreck. And so the people were looking, and in all of these situations, Germany was the same, Russia was the same. You see that, and we'll talk more about that later in depth. But you see these countries, their economy is a wreck. And my battery is low. That's why I'm reaching up and touching the screen. Hopefully it didn't look too weird. These economies are in a wreck. And when an economy is in a wreck, people look to government for answers. We're seeing that today with this whole virus thing. I mean, we're looking to the government, give us a check, help our business out. And a lot of times, government can't help. But people are willing to sacrifice their freedom in order to get that economic stability again. And we see that happen in all of these nations, Germany and Italy and Russia. And then we will get to Japan a little bit later. But I want you to understand, and I want you to read about the League of Nations. The League of Nations was Woodrow Wilson's brain baby, and the United States wouldn't even join it. Congress voted it down. It was just a weak organization. So they tried a couple of things, and this is very important as far as Japan is concerned, the Washington Naval Conference. And they met in 1921 and 22. They had several meetings there. And they decided what we'll do to maybe avoid war in the future, because World War I was supposed to be the war to end all wars. They said, hey, we'll only allow nations to produce a certain amount of tonnage of ship per year. But we'll exempt a few nations. The United States, you can build some more, and Britain, you can build some more. But other nations, you can't. Japan got mad about this. They got angry about it. And we'll see that Japan starts a naval buildup that is unreal because they didn't like it. Another thing was the Locarno Pact, and you'll read about that. Germany had signed an agreement with France and Belgium saying, hey, this border that you two nations have, it's permanent. We'll see how that works. But that was another attempt to avoid war in the future. The third one, the Kellogg-Briand Pact. Now, Kellogg it was Frank Kellogg. He was an American Secretary of War. And basically, the Kellogg-Briand Pact says that nations from now on, instead of having a war, we'll solve our problems diplomatically. We'll sit down at a table and we'll discuss it together. Now, to me, that's dumb. I mean, if we lived in a perfect world and if everyone was a Christian, perhaps we could, and we could sit down and we could say, hey, we've got a problem here, let's work this out. But in real life application between hostile nations just doesn't work. But it was something that was actually agreed upon. You'll see this is on page 319, the shifts in post-World War. It talks about imperialism and how the tide of imperialism was changing, like, where different countries owned different places, colonies on different continents. And it talks about China, and I want you to read a little bit about it. It talks about Sun Yat-sen. The Qing or Qing dynasty was failing. We talked about that last chapter. And so they're trying to replace the government. And anyway, long story short, the government known as the Kuomintang Nationalist Party takes over. But then Sun Yat-sen dies in 1924, and Chiang Kai-shek takes over. He becomes the leader, And a radical thing happens in his a little group of radicals break off. They form the Chinese Communist Party. And a guy by the name of Mao Zedong, or Mao Zedong, takes over. And I want you to watch this, about a minute video. You'll see it included, but I want you to watch it. And I won't tell you what I think of Mao, but it is sad that there was a survey done a while back of high school and college students, and just a very small percentage had ever heard of Mao Zedong. So I want you to watch this video and understand he was, well, to put it the least harsh way I can, he was a mass murderer. And you'll see this video. I want you to read the chapter, though, and it talks a little bit about the Middle East and Pan-Arabianism, or Arabianism. You'll see about that and how it relates to Israel. But once again, do the section quiz. This is on page 321, questions 1 through 6. If you'll get that done, we'll be good to go. And tomorrow we will pick up and talk a little bit more. Let me turn the page, because, we will talk about development in science and art during this time. Anyway, listen, just read your chapter, do the section quiz. Hopefully you're keeping up with all your work. If you have any questions, send a message. There's a feature private message on there. You've got my email address, I believe, but if not, it's dlee.mvca@gmail.com. If you have any questions, ask me. Hope you all are doing well, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.